Allen's Investigate, airing live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans. Yay, and welcome to the Allen's Investigate with me, Shona Allen.
And I'm Gary Allen, the Cockney Bard.
We're broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 and 107.7 FM from New Orleans and also on Roku. Now, this week, we'd like to welcome very special guest and dear friend, Kevin O'Doherty, author, filmmaker and spiritual teacher. He was a regular for many years on Liverpool City Talk FM as an esoteric pundit and has over 40 years' experience in his fields. Kevin wrote his first book, The Psychic and Spiritual Awareness Manual, a DIY Guide to Enlightenment, in 2014, and his most recent book is Secrets of the Egyptian Nag Hammadi, or Hammadi, available on Amazon. Welcome, Kevin.
Yeah, welcome, Kevin.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be back on and great to see the show going from strength to strength.
Well, it's very kind of you to say so. What a week it's been, Kevin, eh? What a week it's been. We've had Donald Trump getting indicted, our friend Donald. And you know what? We're looking forward to the invite to go and have dinner with him in Milan. I do hope it comes soon. And also, we've had 10-foot aliens this week. And also... there was a sighting of a 1,000-mile-an-hour aircraft, a UFO, going across, where was it? Tor Bay. And it interfered with the
Red Arrows.
The Red Arrows, yeah. So it's been a great week.
Do you ever remember that film of BBC when they filmed Concorde back in the day? And there's it gets buzzed by a UFO. And it comes down. It's kind of flying along. Concorde, they're showing off Concorde. It's out in Bristol somewhere, and it's flying away. And then this light comes down, buzzes it, bounces up and down, and they've never been able to explain it.
No, there is a lot of unexplainable things.
An experimental flight of Concorde, first supersonic airliner, don't forget. So sometimes maybe these things, have a curiosity about our development, and but no one can explain it, you see. So yeah, not that unusual, is it?
Clearly, in the case of the air show recently, I think it was last weekend in Devon, it obviously wanted to be part of the formation of the Red Arrows, didn't it? It's obviously showing off, I think.
Well, I can't wait for the alien invasion, which is no doubt coming soon. So.
It's still coming, yes.
I've got me crash helmet ready anyway.
And if you look in the old days when you look at our grandparents and great-grandparents, they would put stuff in jars and everything else, preserve things. Today we call them preppers.
Yeah.
Whereas that was just normal back then, So, we're looking at simulated reality.
Yeah, moving on.
Are we really here,
I'm sure, yeah. You've not been abducted anyway. It's definitely there. Yeah. Is that CGI? Or...
we actually, how can I put it? In terms of reality, thought what if we could get into maybe not so much looking at the deep sort of matrix type thing where everything's an illusion and stuff like that, but bring it down a gear to where things that we see in everyday life are simulations, that we accept simulations as real things. And I thought that's a very interesting sneaky way in which simulations come into our lives, especially now with AI. It's really gone full throttle now.
Yeah.
We must be cautious as well. But to put it in simplistic terms, I read a very complicated book, which I'm not even going to go into, by Dr. John Baudrillard, Simulation and Simulacra, where he puts forward that everything is hyper-real and simulated, and basically puts forward the idea that maps aren't real. right? They don't represent any real geography. You can get from A to B using a map, but it may or may not represent the real world. For instance, like if you look at this sort of standard route for a bus route, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it looks quite convincing. You can follow it, and all over the world they use these maps. You go into the bus station or the train station, you'll see, but particularly bus stations where people want to know each stop of the bus, and they'll show you one of these maps, and it's real, and you can follow it because it's linked to one of these timetables. So I'm holding up a timetable with the destinations on it and the times and the number of the route, so you can follow that. But if you were to place, if we go back to the original map, if we go place that map over the real map, what we'll call a real map of the world, it doesn't resemble it in any way, shape or form. But it's a code, you see. It's a bit like the London Underground map. It gets you from A to B, but it doesn't represent. So what he was saying is that they have sneakily created a world using these devices where we think we're living, that things are real. So to do with maps, he says, people will fight over the map rather than the land. They get onto hidden lands, I don't know. But so he says Disney World, for instance, is accepted as a real place. Everyone accepts. I've been to Disney World. Mickey really does live there, and Goofy and all them, I've been there, man. I've been there, But what he says is it's a copy. It's a simulation. It's a copy without an original. And this is the way in which advertisers and governments and think tanks slowly create other realities for us, which we think are real. And we start to lose what the real geography is, what reality is. So I know it sounds a bit deep, but when you look at the Matrix film that was made in 1998, I think it was, or 99, I certainly got a release in 99. It's amazing that film was ever made, because those who know the Matrix film, will know that it's putting forward the idea that a lot of things are simulated. And you look at our lives, everything is simulated. And with the AI, you're not even really getting in to see the doctor now. It's a simulation. It's a screen. You're not meeting real people. We've got artificial AI art now, mimicking, actually winning awards.
Well, this quite interesting, isn't it? Because I know things like the Tom Cruise. There was a picture released recently, and they were supposed to have been his. I think it was some awards ceremony or something, and they were supposed to be his stunt doubles, but they were actually AI generated. And I've seen quite a few pictures now, and it's quite shocking because they look so real. And how can you tell the difference? It's worrying. And also some of the Hollywood actors now are coming forward and saying, they're being replaced by AI. And I think Harrison Ford, as an example, they're using an AI device to actually make him look younger.
Yeah. Same with Jeff Bridges in the remake of Tron. They digitized his face. It was a bit rough the way they did it, but don't forget they were just trialing it then. They've perfected it now. So what are we seeing? You look at the news, and I worked for many years in the news and still kind of do, on occasion. And a lot of what you see isn't real. The sets aren't real. When you go into a newsroom, it's just a desk, and often the desk isn't real. It's all green screened and dropped in. I was manager of a TV studio until probably about 3 years ago now, with many hundreds of hours of, broadcast. And we had stuff in there, pedestal cameras and things. We could make anything look like anything. I built numerous fake sets, and it's very easy to do. Now, we're doing it out of budgetary considerations, but I still think there is this, agenda to fool the people, to how much, what is real. I mean, if you look at the stars in the sky, right? You think, well, that's Mars over there, right? Because you can see it. But it's actually not quite there, because it's a bit of an illusion. And what they do when they use a sextant to navigate across by the stars across the sea, they put in a calculation to they calibrate it, because there's a discrepancy between where you see it and where it actually is. They never tell you that, but anyone who does navigation at sea will tell you there's a calculation for it. So and it's the same with maps. You know, you look at the maps that we grew up with in school, and really, you know, Greenland is nearly the size of Europe, but really it's not. It's only about the size of the UK. So on certain map projections, you've got these huge, I mean, you look at Canada on certain maps, and it's absolutely massive, isn't it? And Russia at the top, it's huge. And Africa and South America, by comparison, are quite small, when actually the reverse is true. And people want to research the Gauls-Peters map, which is one of the accepted maps that we use in the world. You'll see people look at it and go, that's not a real map. But it actually is, because Africa is massive on it. And so is South America and Europe and Britain and Canada and Greenland are all squashed in at the top and are very, very small by comparison. And that's actually a more accurate map of the world. So when you start to get into maps, this is where that book I talked about, Dr. John Baudrillard, where he goes into maps. And after you read it for a while, you think, I'm getting home tonight, you know. Where do we live? Where's France? You know. And if anyone wants to look at the most accurate map in the world, right, just Google it. Type in the most accurate map of the world, and you will not recognize it. It's won awards. You've got Antarctica is in the bottom right. England, Britain, UK is top left, squashed up. And then you've got the rest of the landmasses are stretched across. So who decided on what the maps are?
Well, there'll be people now, Kevin. There'll be people at home saying, "Where the bloody hell am I?"
Exactly. And how am I getting home tonight? You know.
Oh Lord.
So you know, when you look at they go into this thing to do with GPS that was developed particularly, you know, post-war, and to set a coordinates that get you to where you are. So when you look at the what's called the azimuthal equidistant map, there's that's an accurate map. But Australia, because it's at the edge of the flat pancake, is stretched. So if you actually, that can't be to scale, you know, it's massive. So people will tell you, like my own family who live in Australia and have driven from one end to the other, east to west and west to east, Uma Malumbra all the way to Wollydinga, as they say over there, and have driven it. They'll tell you how long it takes and how many car miles it is. But if you look at that, what's like the United Nations map, you'll see that the sections of it get bigger towards the edge. However, if you look at the Gleason's projection map, right, which is the same map, Gleason has put in all the coordinates around the side and all the formulas to work out and to shrink that down. And I think he's making a very good claim when he says that this is how the world looks.
Goodness me.
Very interesting documentary on it, if you can find it. A professor analyzed the map. He was a Sri Lankan gentleman. He doesn't show himself in the map because he's too scared of losing tenure or being ridiculed and that.
Yeah.
But shows you the calculations and how to do it. It's got a little set square and a little rule on it that you move around. It's not just a map. It's got an extra piece on it, like a set square. And you use that, and you use the formulas at the side, and it tells you exactly how long it's going to get to, you know, it's going to take for you to get from A to B using a ship, a sail ship, how long it's going to take to walk, you know, or a set speed. It's very, very complicated, but superb map of the world. And yet it's discredited. No one, gives it the credence that it deserves. And I thank that gentleman that I've got the video somewhere on one of my hard drives. I stored it because, you know, we're losing a lot of information, aren't we, with censorship?
Yeah, definitely.
Things are disappearing. So there is a case to be asked about maps. What I'm saying to people is, you know, the GPS system of coordinates is really a system to get you, like with that bus map we've just looked at, from A to B. And people say, well, hang on a minute, Google Earth, that's like a 3D model of the world. But there's a problem with that. As a motion graphics guy myself, of many years experience, there's a number of things that we can do to analyze the Google Earth map, and there are errors within it. One of the most colossal errors in it is if you get it up on your screen and you've got the North Pole and the South Pole, which touch the top and bottom frame of your screen, that represents the most accurate globe of the Earth. If you go in any further, it distorts at the equator, it bulges out. And if you zoom out, it goes flat. So as a graphic designer and forensically looking at it, that's how we would say, there's the ball there. Now, if that's the ball, there's a problem with it, because if you put a pin in the map, say where I am at the moment, which is Liverpool in the UK, if I put a pin in it and then I draw a line across using some of the software that I have, it tells me that the center to the edge is approximately 2,000 miles, possibly 2,100 miles. The problem there, of course, is that the center to the edge of the Earth is 3,959 miles. So basically 2,000 miles are missing.
Bit of a problem.
And if you look at Ireland, the west coast of Ireland, which is, you know, where my family are from, if you look at Valencia, which is the closest point to the United States and the what we call the American continent, you look at that distance on there, and, you know, as my father would say, it would only take you a couple of days in a boat to get across there. Yet it takes like a week and a half in the boat. Like, what's going on? And it's squashed up. See, so, you know, what are we actually seeing? So I just want people to question maps a little bit more. They are all critical, don't forget. And as Baudrillard says in his book, empires are built on these maps. People fight over the map rather than the actual geography.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting as well, because I think, you know, we need people to think themselves independently about things. I mean, we're very much reliant on in this society of listening to what we term as an expert. Should we trust experts? I mean, we don't know whether they have an agenda. Is somebody paying them who has an agenda? And so, you know, I think the thing is, it's that old adage of think outside the box, because there's no growth in a box, is there?
No. And think outside the ball as well, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Well, of course, the cube was the ancient symbol of the Earth, I believe, wasn't it, many moons ago?
Oh, right, okay.
So that's quite interesting.
Very interesting.
I think one of the things that quite interests me, I don't know whether you want to talk about that now or a bit later on, is NASA.
Yeah, sure. Well, we could segue into that very quickly with just one point on the GPS thing. What happened to MH12? Yeah. Wow. You know, now, I was thinking about when you asked me to come on the show a few days ago, and I was thinking, you know, we had a pre-chat, didn't we, about what we might talk about and all that sort of thing. And it occurred to me that, you know, you could put, you know, a message in a bottle and it'll get to wherever, you know, following the currents of the earth, you know, the water. Yet somehow, you know, a full-size, you know, airliner replete with passengers and everything, you know, made up of millions of components and parts, goes missing. Now you could say, well, that's what happened to the Titanic, but actually there were plenty of survivors and there was plenty of wreckage and there was plenty of other stuff from the Titanic. In fact, stuff from the Titanic still washes up now, apparently, something, an item or a letter or something, or just go and research it. So, but yet there's nothing from MH12. Now, my suspicion is that was, I know that there's stuff about it all being a hoax and all. Let's push that to one side. Let's not discuss that at the moment. Let's look at actually in the context of these maps. Maybe it was sent outside of GPS, because all ships and all planes, everyone who travels this world uses GPS, and it was brought in after the Second World War. So, if you control the GPS and what the algorithm says, control anything. So maybe, and it's not the only plane to go missing, of course. So how can that happen? And I think there's a bit of me is suspicious and thinks that they went off, and don't forget, Malaysian Airlines were targeted twice, of course. Just after they had their parliament had issued arrest warrants, you see, for George Bush and Tony Blair. Invasion and weapons of mass destruction, you see. So maybe they were being taught a lesson, you see. We can make it disappear, sort of thing. So I always feel there's a political angle to these things, but planes just don't go missing like that. And if you look at Lockheed Martin, Rolls-Royce, all those, they don't trust the airlines, and they have trackers on the engines themselves independently. They will have known exactly where that's gone.
Exactly.
So what's going on? So so NASA developed with the US Navy and other global services, including the British Royal Navy and so forth. They in post-war they created GPS as a global position, and to know where you are at any point. But there's a number of discrepancies with that as well, because I read a book about the North Pole many years ago. Can't think of the name of it right now, but it went deeply into explorers like Peary and people like that. And they saw, once they traveled north, it got warmer, they said. And if you look at all these Scandinavian stories, all these Tartarian stories from northern Russia, and Inuits from likes of Canada, they all tell of the lands beyond the pole, the North Pole. And they say it's a land of light and warmth and greenery and things like that. Now, Peary, I think it was in his diary, they said, well, he just got a bit confused when he was putting these entries in. He was losing his marbles and so that's what they said, But interestingly enough, and still to this day, I'm not sure. I think you can't come within 600 miles of the North Pole.
And there's a treaty as well, isn't there? So people that are supposed to be at loggerheads with each other still managed to have actually made a treaty not to go there.
So that's Antarctica, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm talking about the North Pole, the magnetic. Let's see if I can get it on here now. Let's see if we can get a figure. Why can't planes fly over the North Pole? Right. It's now it's interesting. I think I've forgotten how many miles it is now. But it's this huge distance you can't go. How far is it? I can't think of the number right now, but it's something like it's in the hundreds of miles anyway. You can't go within the geographical North Pole because it's tied in with the magnetic North Pole, which shifts. Now, if you look at the old maps going back, you have for ages and ages, I'm talking about epochs and eras, clearly there are these four lands that are mapped to the North Pole. Rufus Negra is the mountain at the center. It's a magnetic mountain. It's Black Mountain, and it has four land masses with four rivers that come from it. Now,
Black Rock, isn't it?
Yeah, and if you look at all these ancient maps that on it until about early 1800s, together with a lot of other lands like High Brasil, which is off the coast of Ireland. All these places have disappeared. There are lands around Greenland and Iceland, separate from Iceland, and there are lands near California. And also California itself is shown to be a separate land in the earliest maps, as there's a trip down that west coast, and there was some catastrophe apparently.
Yeah, I remember Shona talking about the Perry Rees map, isn't it? Is it the Perry Rees map?
No, the Perry Rees map. Yeah, that was taken from an earlier Turkish. He was a Turkish admiral, but he took the map from an earlier navigator's map, and it shows Antarctica as being green, I believe, rather than snow-covered.
And matching the coastline brilliantly. And it was
exactly
the Antarctic survey done by the British in the 50s at some point, where I think the British developed sonar. We were able to map the coast, and then someone said, hang on a minute, that looks like the Piri Reis map. And it does. And there's mountains and lands and things. So you see where we're going with this, that there's we're not really shown reality, and the reality that we're shown isn't the full picture.
No, what's I was going to say, what springs to mind as well as you're talking about that and about the disappearances of airplanes is obviously the Bermuda Triangle.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of cynical people say that that's where the rockets come down, that NASA fires up, which is why it's a bit shady and a bit dodgy around there, because they kind of arc, don't they? As a kid looking up, I'm an amateur astronomer, one of the first gifts I got when I was a kid was a telescope, and my mum got me a cheap one to start with to see if I was, going to bite, and I did, and then she got me a proper one. I prefer binoculars now, by the way. Omnipresent binoculars, which anyone's listening on radio, I have at the side, ready to spot that, wherever. So anyway, and camera always locked and loaded, ready to go. So looking at sorry, I got sidetracked. What were we saying there?
We were talking about the Bermuda Triangle.
Yeah. So basically, you've got NASA controlling, how can I put it, like things like satellites and stuff like that you see, that we are told are hundreds of miles up. So as a kid, when I was a kid, I would see these lights moving across the sky. And at first thought, well, they must be UFOs. And this is the point I was making, is that when you are a child, you have an aesthetic response to something, a logic kicks in. Like when kids see rockets go up and then they go down, you expect it to go straight up. But, you cannot see a satellite at 200, 300, 400 miles up, because it's only the size of the fridge behind me, or maybe a box van or something. The biggest one they ever sent up, they said, was the Hubble, and that was about the size of a small school bus. That's the biggest payload they've ever sent up. Satellite. So here's the thing. In Liverpool, right, if I look to Paris, France, right, which is about 350 miles from where I am now, can I see a van in Paris?
Nope.
But if it's up there, somehow I can see it. You see, these are these satellites. That's what you're seeing.
Well, it's a bit like the CCTV footage of a bank robber, isn't it? It's all kind of hazy and pixelated, and you can't really see it very well. And yet, you can see fantastic images all the way up in space, can't you?
Oh, yes. Planets. Oh, yes.
That's right. Antares and the planets around it. You can even have creatures in green.
Oh, yes.
Something, the guy who's turned over the local convenience store is like totally blurred out,
That's right, yeah.
So there's a number of problems with all that. And we do have to be cynical about what we're shown, because as a cinematographer, someone who has expertise with cameras and stuff, I know, the Harvest Moon last year, I filmed, which I think was the 31st of October. I managed to get the moonrise over a farm field. I think I'm not going to get anything here. It was a new camera I bought. It had a 26 zoom on it, 4K. And eventually the moon appeared. I was rewarded standing in a farm field, freezing, you know. And but what happened was an aeroplane flew across the face of the moon. Now that happens quite a lot when you close up. But when you compare that, this is footage I've taken, but when you compare that with International Space Station footage of it transversing the face of the moon, it's basically the same size as an airliner. Now, if the International Space Station is 230 miles up, it varies because of atmospheric pressure, they say, in height, but it never comes lower than 230 miles. Right, and it's twice the size, 2 jumbo jets stuck together, half the size of a football field. So if I look from where I am now, if I look down to Southampton, can I see half a football field from where I am now? And how come it's the same size within the frame as an airliner, which is only 9 miles away, by the way? It was taken off from John Lennon Airport, which in line of sight was 8 to 9 miles from where I was on the coach road. Yeah, and I've taken lots of pictures like that, lots of footage like that. I used this in a talk I did about 3 years ago. We used the same footage, compared the two together. Anyone interested, just look at ISS, International Space Station, transversing the moon, and then look at a plane, an aeroplane or airplanes, they say in the United States, going across the face of the moon. That plane can only be 8, 9, maybe 15 miles away tops, because you can't resolve it with a camera more than that with a movie camera, or you know, your stills. If the moon is within the frame and a plane crosses it and you can see it, that plane can be the maximum distance. That plane, assuming it's a big plane like an A808 or wherever it is, the huge one, would be 15 miles away. After that, you can't see an 808 plane 20-25 miles away, no matter what camera you've got. And within the size of the moon, if you know what I mean, within that frame. So the moon, the size of the moon is what you call your control. That's the constant in the equation. That never changes. Well, it may change a little bit, but only fractionally. So you're able to work out the distance, is what I'm saying. So again, are we into a simulation? And yeah, with NASA, look at in Texas, they have the biggest, clearest, deepest freshwater pool with a full mock-up, fully working mock-up of the International Space Station, where the astronauts rehearse their spacewalks and things, you know, underwater, because they say that buoyancy underwater. Well, you know, if you eat a big dinner and you put on a jumpsuit and go into the sea, it's still heavy on your stomach. You're not floating. You know, you're not floating. You know, it's not weightless. So I don't buy that at all. So you have to question that. And when you look at the full scale mock-up, minus the solar panels and that, it's just the sections of it. I can tell you now, as someone who works at motion graphics, very easy to plate that. And this is what you see in movies all the time, in real time, and with equipment I've used in the studio, virtual reality stuff on the TriCaster 4000, TriCaster 8000 I've used, and there are modules that plug into that give you real-time AI, and will give you false corridors, or will plate onto a cylinder any texture you want with shadows. And you know, you look at that mock-up, if they're spending all that money and time simulating it or training, well, why not? Wouldn't it why go into space then? You know, I mean, that's one of the questions. This is why shows like this are very important, is because we can become caught up in the truth of the lie.
Yeah.
Lie of truth.
Exactly. It's making me think that I was watching today, funnily enough, it was a video on Brighteon, I think it was. And it was of astronaut Dave Williams, and he was in the quest, and it was quite interesting because he was supposed to be on the space station, and there was all bubbles coming out, so it was like it was underwater. So clearly there was all bubbles coming out, and then the next few frames, then you see in the airlock there's actually a scuba tank floating to the top, and then someone quickly grabs it and pulls it back down again.
Get that scuba tank, quick!
Things to
Oh, Lord.
Yeah, so there is a lot of... I mean, if you look at the International Space Station, it's basically... There is a full mock-up of it on a jumbo jet as well. And they do parabolic flights, but it's a full mock-up of the International Space Station.
Interesting.
So, and now what's interesting as well, when you look at the official photographs of the ISS, there are to the left of the picture, there are two portholes that you know, all that's missing is the airliner seats. And it's interesting, isn't it, that that space station is, you know, the size of an airliner. Now, a jumbo jet, hollowed out, is huge, and they do amazing things inside these aircrafts. But never forget, and this is a fact, that there is a full mock-up of the ISS on a jumbo jet, and also on a jumbo jet. If you want to research it, Sophia is a better name. Sophia, SOFIA, NASA. Check it out. The back end of the jumbo plane is swapped out, and they can put in any telescope, Hubble, you name it. They can put in even the new one. What's the new one called now? So I just can't think of it now. The one they're getting the pictures of.
I know the one you mean. I can't remember either.
So it's the new one anyway. Well, anyway, what they do is they swap out these telescopes, and the pictures they get from the back of an aeroplane pointing up are better than what's supposed to come from the Hubble in space, if it is there, if those telescope satellites are there. Because Robert Bassano, and we owe him a great debt, he actually outed the Sophia plane because he was doing, I think, an MA at one of the big prestigious universities in the United States. And he got through to, he made a phone call because there was a problem with the pictures he was using for his thesis or whatever it was he was working on, that was said to be from the Hubble, and they were dated. But that was at a time where the space shuttle had gone up and retrieved the Hubble into a lower orbit to repair it and push it back. So he wanted to know, if he used these pictures and these images, you know, just to verify it academically, am I using, where are these pictures from? So he gets through by, as Dickens once said, you know, by one of those staggering coincidences that the devil sometimes throws in the way of his disciples. He just so happened to get through to one of the guys who took those pictures, and they were taken off the back of an airplane. But the telescope is also called Hubble. So bait, isn't it, mate? So, you know, you look at how much it costs, $380,000 on average to send a satellite into space. It's easier to stick something on the back of a plane or on a balloon, isn't it? Well,
I've seen balloons go up with satellites. So, you know, and I've seen them come down as well. So yeah.
I think what is interesting, Kevin, as well, is Operation Paperclip, because a lot of the Nazi scientists were actually recruited by the US government and brought over to America at the end of World War II. And actually many of the positions were in what would later become NASA were actually given to these people. And a couple of the main or key figures would have been Werner von Braun is one of them. He's very famous. Yeah. And one that there was also someone else as well, Heinz Haber, that was it. Now, he was obviously a member of several Nazi organizations as well. Now, they were actually working with Disney, interestingly. And of course, Disney were coming up with all these different programs to kind of disseminate this kind of idea of space travel and rockets to the general populace.
Well, we're back to simulation and simulacra, aren't we? Disney World, a copy without an original. Yeah. It gives you a fake reality, which, as Baudrillard said, then becomes the hyper real. Yeah. You know, you can't argue against it. And, you know, all the motion graphics are done by Disney. You know, I used to watch the Sky at night. I don't watch BBC or anything like that. And British Bollocks Corporation, isn't it, basically?
Oh, don't swear.
It's not a swear word, is it? So anyway, the thing is, they actually have artists who work on all the planets and all these kind, not on the planets, but on the images. And don't forget, you must remember that there is a difference between a photograph and an image. An image is something imagined. A photograph is photoreal. So be very, very cautious when you see images. An image, you know, that means it's not real, by the way. Yeah. It's a creation out of someone's mind.
Yeah, so, I think it's very interesting, isn't it? And of course, he worked very closely with Disney as a technical director, making, you know, the films that I mentioned. But what's also, I think, deeply interesting is that when he passed away, just before his death, he wanted Psalms 19:1 mentioned on his gravestone. Yeah. Now, Psalms 19:1, it says, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork." Firmament, interesting.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Incidentally, by the way, slightly on a tangent, is it's interesting that Walt Disney's last words were Kurt Russell.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah. So I always wonder if when Kurt Russell dies, his last words will be Walt Disney.
Disney.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So, yeah, the firmament in terms of, well, you know, if you go back in time through the legends, if you look at, they say Kronos is the king
god of time,
and the father of all the gods and everything. However, in my book, which is
a little plug there, a little plug.
There you go.
More plugs in the bathroom centre.
She did my joke there.
My sister made the bookmark for me.
Oh, no.
Yeah, Umbrella Man, and that she's got it covered. Yeah,
brilliant.
But what I did some research, because in the ancient Egyptian, they talk about the firmament and the waters. So in early antiquity, Oceanus was the father of all the gods, and the name of the god of the waters, or great river that surrounded the earth. He should not be confused with Poseidon, the Greek god of the sea. However, it is worth noting that in some schools of thought, he is demoted to merely a bit part player in the whole Greek pantheon. It all depends on what you believe and whom you go to for information. According to M.L. West, the etymology of his name is unclear and cannot be clarified from the Greek. The lower stasis version has him merely as the eldest of the Titan, offspring of Uranus, the sky, and Gaia, the earth. So here we have the triad of land, sea, and air. Some have pointed to the deception of Zeus in the Iliad as signifying Homer's awareness of an earlier tradition where Oceanus and his female counterpart Tethys, and not Uranus and Gaia, were the father and mother of all the gods, respectively. Hypnos, the god of sleep, proclaims Oceanus as the genesis for all, meaning the father of the Titans. So if you read the Nag Hammadi and the Egyptian text, they go back that everything came from the waters, and Oceanus, the liquid dynamic, the fluid dynamic, as it describes it in creation, the motion, began, and the earth was separated, by the firmament separates the waters that surround the earth. So if you look at it, it is space, a vacuum, drawn on. I sound a bit like I've done a lot of things. I in my line of work, I also realized that I had to have proper skills like being a painter and decorator or something, because in my line of work in media and stuff like that, you can end up, getting close to the street at times, because it's feast and famine. So I did, I studied 3 years. I did my BTEC National Diploma in motor vehicle service and repair, mechanical service and repair, but I specialized in motor vehicle. Point I'm making is that I understand about strength of materials. I used to build circuits for cars. I know about vacuums and things. I have a working knowledge, unlike a lot of academics who put a plug on a kettle,
Yeah, and this is mostly theory as well, isn't it?
Theory.
That's right. So what I'm saying is, to me, the idea that space is a vacuum, and having written the book on the Nag Hammadi, analyzed it and retranslated it, they're of the same mind that it's solid, that there is a substance there, a fluid dynamic of some kind.
Which is very interesting as well, sort of talking about the fluid and the waters, because the very name astronaut, actually, they're made up of Greek words, astra being star and naut being actually, that's where we get the term nautical, meaning a sailor. Yeah. So I think that's quite interesting, but it's applying to water and sea and, rivers. It's a water-based thing. It's not a traveler. It's a sea-based term. So I think that's quite interesting.
It is. The whole thing around, as a kid growing up, I was told that the stars are million, billion, trillion, zillion miles away. But when you get, I have a love of long lenses. I like long lens photography. I like flatten and perspective, stuff like that. In my films, I always, I'm halfway down the road. People saying, "Where are you?" I'm filming you. We're from here. I like that. Hollywood does it a lot. It's very cinematic to film from a distance. Seldom ever film really close up unless it's for a particular effect or whatever. So working with lenses, you realize that how far away are things? How can they tell distance? So I actually did a TV show called Parallax World, which dealt with the idea was a parallax view. So basically parallax is, it's a bit like you have your left and your right eye. If you close one eye and look through, and then have one eye open, one eye closed, and then swap them over, and you're looking at, say, an object like a cup or something on a table or whatever, you get a slightly different perspective from each one, and your brain puts the two together and you get your stereo vision. You're able then to judge distance, and that's how they tell us they're able to tell the distance of stars. Now, let me get the quote for you. The parallax angle, it says, how astronomers use angular measurement to compute distances in space, right? The parallax angle is the angle between the Earth at one time of year and the Earth 6 months later, meaning it's on the other side of its ellipse. As measured from a nearby star, astronomers use that angle, right, to calculate the distance. Now then, that's all very plausible. You go, yeah, so when the Earth's over there, right, And then 6 months later, when it's sunny, right, and the winter, we take a different measurement of, you know, X2 Checkle Pulsar 19, whatever it is, out there in space, and that should give us the distance. Yeah. Now there's a problem with that, because I think it's Bristol University. There's a video on YouTube, very good one, showing how they do perspective, parallax rather, and perspective. And it's like you're in New York, right, with a telescope. And in Los Angeles, there's a fairly large room, probably about 30 foot wide, with at the center an orange, right? And the Earth would be a petit point, you know, over to one side of the room, right? So you're, as the telescope in New York, right, you're representing a planet which is going to be a similar size, or be as big, let's say big as Jupiter or something like that. So it's the equivalent of looking down a telescope that far, walking from one side of the room to the other, assuming you could see that far, by the way. Walking from one side of the room to the other and saying, oh, I can measure the parallax there. That gives me a distance of 200,499,261 trillion miles. Yeah, you know. So now, Sir Frederick Hoyle, the Astronomer Royal, and many other eminent scientists, and dare I say Tesla touched on it as well, that any parallax, meaning the ability to measure a distance of a star from the surface of the Earth, is the sum of human error. And I've got to agree. You cannot. That's the scale you're talking about.
We have a question here, Kevin, from Craftomatic.
Yeah,
and he's saying, "Is Kevin a flat earther?"
Well, it's flat when you're standing on it.
Like Norfolk is flat.
Yeah, some places are very flat, aren't they? I would say that there's problems with the globe model, but there's also, I know the flat Earth movements like come to the fore again. There's some very good research being done, some really great stuff, and it's interesting that they made a lot of observations that I've made going back over many years with cameras and lenses. And like, for instance, living in Waterloo, I was astounded that on Waterloo Beach, that I can see now people. So in Liverpool, water, it's not all docks, right? The docks stop and then it becomes beach, right, to the north of the city. So it's you stand on the beach, not up on the top or anything. I'm talking about being on the beach. I've lived there for many years, president of Waterloo Spiritualist Church, and I would occasionally book out a camera and things like that, you know, just because that's what you do when you live on the beach. See how far you can see with the ships and everything else. And I was astounded that I could see Llandudno, which is 26 miles away. I kept looking over and I think, it only looks like it's just, you know, I could reach out. I thought that's 26 miles away. And I used to work on Anglesey, which is further along the North Wales coast. And that's 62 miles from Waterloo Beach. And I thought, well, I'll check the elevation. It's 25 feet above sea level. I thought, hang on a minute, I shouldn't really be able to see that. So this is back in the 90s. So I just concluded that it was refraction. You know, I did a painting in the 1990s of sky. And it's one of those kind of spirit paintings that you do. And I saw a huge lens bubble in the sky. It was one of those guidance pictures, you know, where you just pick up the paint, you don't know what you're going to do. Didn't use a brush, I used my fingers and just began swirling the paints around, and it came up with the sky. And I haven't finished it because it kind of stopped at a certain point when I realized what I was being told, that the sky is a lens. And I've always believed that from the last century, from back then. So I then put those experiences down to refraction. So, but what was interesting in the guy who did the Bedford experiment in Cambridge, can't think of his name now, but what I listened to the audiobook by Eric Dubay. I think I'd redone it as an audiobook. I think I stand to be corrected. Okay, but I near fell off my seat when what's his name? The guy who did the Bedford experiment made the same observation from Waterloo Beach that I made.
Quite a coincidence, isn't it? Wow.
Yeah.
Around about 1840 or something. Because I was astounded standing on Waterloo Beach thinking, I can see for miles. I really didn't expect to see that far. And
Amazing.
a few
I was
things.
just going to say that it had a nice message from Lisa. She said, fascinating show. I'm enjoying it very much. Thank you, Lisa. Fan of Ralph Ellis. Yay.
Oh, right.
Thanks, Lisa.
Yes. Ralph.
Yes, we know Ralph.
Yes. I first interviewed Ralph. That would have been 2009. And so that was, he's a bit like, he's perfect for this platform because
he's a fascinating character, Ralph, isn't he?
Very interesting.
Yeah, very interesting.
But it's a really fascinating thing, though, isn't it? I mean, there are things as well that I discovered fairly recently as well, and there's a particular character called John Whiteside Parsons. Have you heard of him?
No, I'm afraid not.
Well, he's very interesting because it's interesting when you talk to people about John Whiteside Parsons. Actually, not many people know, but they should, however, because he was the founder of legendary Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and he worked on the jet-assisted takeoff unit that developed into solid fuel rockets that would help win World War II. So actually, he's quite an interesting chap. Now, what is interesting, so the basis of this goes on to using rocket fuel for rockets so that, that it's in a solid state. Interestingly, he had a cultivated interest in Aleister Crowley.
Right.
And he became the leader of the Ordo Templi Orientis, and he was a friend of L. Ron Hubbard. He was, of course, the founder of Scientology. But Parsons is viewed by many as the founding father of rocketry, and it was echoed by a number of his colleagues, including Werner von Braun, which is interesting.
It is, and the whole thing around, drawing on my experience in mechanical service and repair. I did run my own business for a time. Excuse me. Is that NASA, even as kids at school, right? I was a member of a little group that we had together, and we questioned everything. And we used to laugh at people who'd say, that we've never been to space and stuff like that. We say, we've never been on the moon and all that kind of stuff. I was only like 13, 14. We used to just laugh, but underlying all that was we're always trying to outdo each other with what absurdity we could possibly find out, but always scientific, backbone or spine or substance to it. So as a kid, I got into physics and things. I studied myself because I wasn't able to, the stuff you learn at school wasn't very good. And I'd also had what we call a UFO sighting, a really big one when I was 13. And I didn't realize till I got to the age of 40 how much that had destroyed my life, in as much as, it tore up everything about religion, what I was being taught in school. And as a kid, I couldn't focus in school anymore, and I couldn't tell anyone about the experience or anything. So I knew that there were things that went beyond the physical world, that went beyond physics as we know it, that was intelligent, could move seamlessly in the same way fish move through water. So in the end, I knew about a vacuum. NASA, I used to watch Horizon, which was a BBC Two program back in the day when it was good. And they were explaining, NASA scientist was explaining that if you had an orange, so I keep using oranges, but he did say an orange. If you have an orange in space and you flick it, it'll just keep going because there's a vacuum and there's no resistance on it and all that sort of stuff, right? And so I began to think, and we did at school because we were really into science, me and our little group, how can a rocket work in a vacuum? What's the push off? Can it ignite, all that kind of thing? So when I eventually, qualified in mechanical service and repair, you have to do quite a bit of engineering science as well. And there's a thing NASA say that what they do, how they overcome the vacuum and they can make things change course in space, is that they have an oxidizing agent in the rocket fuel, and they take the road with them. So what does that mean? A lot of people don't know what that means. Well, what it means is, say you've got Mythbusters did this. If you saw that show where they built a perspex chamber, right? And they put in a motor vehicle with a rocket attached to it, and they sucked out all the air. Bearing in mind that you can't suck out all the air. There's always some air in there, you know. But essentially what you'll call a vacuum, as close as we can get it. With an electronic ignition, they fired the rocket, and the model car shot along the length of the perspex model. And they said, see, rockets work in space. Busted, you know. Well, actually, guys, there's a problem with that. And the problem is the weight of the car on the surface gives you the traction, what you call traction. So when your car is static, right, and then it moves into what you call dynamic mode, where you move off, there's a thing called the coefficient of friction. And that's the force applied that allows it to move across a surface. In the case of a car, it's the engine transmits drive through the gear and to the road wheels, and the tires are the friction part. They grip the road and push it along. So if you suck out all the air on a road, the car will still drive because it's getting friction from the road. Whereas in space, it's dangling there. If you've stuck it in space, like Elon Musk's fake car in space, if you believe that, that's out near Uranus now. I used the correct pronunciation.
It looks so fake. It must be real, that one, you mean?
Yeah. We can just indulge you there, Kevin. If we can indulge you there.
Oh, yeah. I've just got to say, if you just joined us, we're broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 and 107.7 FM from New Orleans and on Roku.
With a special guest, Kevin O'Doherty.
Exactly.
Thanks. So this coefficient of friction, basically, it just means the weight of the car pressing down is giving it a grip. Right? So when the rocket fires, they're in a small perspex chamber as well. So it's filling it with gas anyway. The whole experiment that they did is flawed. You know,
of course, yeah, of course.
Now you look at other experiments, particularly done in the United States by, you know, backyard engineers, some really great stuff where, you know, you've got Cletus or whatever, some guy out in the middle of nowhere. He's made a sealed drum vessel. He stuck a camera inside and he's got a feather with a fan and it's blowing, the fan's blowing the feather, and then he sucks out all the air and nothing happens. And do you remember, Shona and Gary, when we were at school, it was in my school, that when you suck out the air out of a chamber, you can't hear the bell. And then when you put the air back in, you can hear the bell ring, you know, I don't know if you were that experiment. So if you suck out the air, there's no energy, there's no traction. So, but this is the kind of simulated fake stuff that they're putting out there that isn't science. It doesn't stand up to scrutiny.
No. And then you've got Van Allen's belt, haven't you? You know, to explain.
So that's what NASA mean when they say we take the road with us. So it basically puts out this big cloud of gas and then it fires the rocket off that. Yeah, I'm buying it. Yeah, sure. You know, the Van Allen.
I was going to say there's some quite interesting videos actually on Brighteon. I mean, you might not find them anywhere else, but you know, they're worth looking at. I mean, whatever your views on anything, I think it's always worth having a look and a study of things to try and get, you know, both sides of the story rather than just what you're presented with.
Exactly. You have to get both sides of the story. It's most important because that's what we're here for. We're here to find the truth, aren't we?
And if you find it, let me know where it is because
it's on Brighteon.
And also, I mean, you know, there's also a video where we watch this camera tied to a rocket. That's an interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah, no, that was interesting. That was the Civilian Space Exploration Team, which is actually a non-government sponsored project. And in 2014, they launched an amateur rocket into space, and it was the CSXT Go Fast. Now, after about 72 miles, it gets stuck. And you can find this on YouTube, by the way, if you want to look it up. So that's quite interesting. So they've got cameras in varying positions on the rocket, and it's kind of twirling and going all the way up to the top. Then it just stops. So something is stopping it.
Yeah, something, hits the firmament basically. Like it strikes something. I think I've seen.
It does,
yeah. So I mean, the part of the mystery is. I'm not sure if we're ever really going to know the truth. If you look at Admiral Byrd's video, which was on the chronograph or something, it was the one of those famous watch companies sponsored it, the something chronograph. On that, he does talk about lands beyond the South Pole, and he talks about being as at least as big as the United States of America, where no man has been and no one's explored. And you've got to really take that serious when you look at his third mission, I think it was, and there was how many thousands of boats, not thousands of boats, sorry, troops rather. It's supposed to be an investigation, a scientific thing, expedition. I forgot what it's called. Something like getting over the wall or something. It was breaking through the wall, something like that. It was called. Can't think of the name of it. Over the wall or the high wall or something. Because you have this
Operation High Jump. Was that it?
That's it. Yeah, about getting over the wall. Yeah, that's it. That sounds very much like it. Now, those ships. If you look at that flotilla, that's not an expedition. That's an invasion.
Yeah, there's a lot of military vehicles, wasn't there, for a mapping project?
And if you look at the South Pole, I really have started to come to think that the world is bigger than we're told.
Well, for sure.
There are these, like if you look at Hy Brasil, which is the island off the west coast of Ireland, it's interesting that during the Rendlesham Forest incident, I'm good friends with Larry Warren. He's in fact on your show, was it last week or the week before, the detective
Gary Hesseltine.
Has done extensive research verifying his account. So I've known Larry for a long time. He got a lot of land-based and all that sort of stuff. But Colonel Peniston, I'm sure it's Colonel Peniston. There was two senior officers. One was Holt, and the other was Peniston. I think it's in Peniston's diary. After the incident where they encountered this craft in Rendlesham Forest, this triangular craft, which buzzed the nuclear base there for a while. It's kind of British Roswell, basically. Huge case, which was discussed last. If anyone can just go to last week's show, was it, to get up to date with that?
Yeah, it was the week before last. Yeah.
Right now, well, the interesting thing is with that is, I'm sure it's Peniston's diary. Just after that, it wasn't discussed in the show, but he was bombarded with a series of zeros and ones in his head in a pattern, and he couldn't get them out of his head, so he wrote them in his notebook. And then when we became aware, with the digital age of binary codes, zeros and ones, he decided to get them analyzed. And one of the 5 coordinates that come up is the coordinates for Hy Brasil in the Atlantic off the coast of which this UFO was given him. Now, that island mysteriously disappeared off all the maps. I mean, it's actually, apparently all these land masses are still there. It's just that Google Earth covers them. Right?
Well, the thing is, sorry, Kevin, I was just going to say that with these, the difficult thing to get your head around is that if we're saying there's a firmament, let's just say there's a firmament. So if there's a firmament, then we are sort of getting to the understanding that the sun, moon, and the planets are underneath the firmament, aren't we? And we've never been to the moon. That's what we're actually saying, aren't we?
Well, I think that ship sailed, hasn't it, that one?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it's interesting because Jonathan King, a well-known blah, 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 he actually saying everyone's gone to the moon. I don't know what he was on, but
well, we all know what happened to him, don't we?
Oh, yeah. That's for another show, I think. Oh, God.
He was another Jimmy Savile, wasn't he?
Yeah, no. But it's the interesting thing about it is, like I think about this, and when you do your research and you're looking at reverse engineering and things like that. I mean, I've actually, as I said on another show, I did see a UFO, an unidentified flying object, and that went at incredible speeds. Now, the point of it is the technology that the military have is so advanced, and you do wonder if they've actually conquered anti-gravity.
Yeah, I would say they have, because what we're given in our world are these simulations. Like, for instance, your smartphone is a simulation. It's a crappy copy of what you can do yourself, right? It's everything is organized for you, all your friends, everything, even the maps, the weather and things like that. These are all things that we were born with within ourselves, to know and to recall and to remember and to communicate and to know where we are and that sort of thing. We have these things within us, but they give us these devices so that we don't develop ourselves. And this is where the simulation's taken over. Right, so it's a simulation of, it's a crappy copy, basically, of what you do yourself. And you're happiest when you're away from your phone and things like that, if you can be that way. I know family considerations and stuff like that notwithstanding. But the thing is, all the devices and things that we have are there as instruments of suppression. And every time there's a development in anything, it's used it's weaponized against us, because as human beings, we differ from all the other creatures on Earth in that we can imagine things, we can reason, we speculate about things in the same way we're talking now about the origins of things, and we can discuss things. Whereas, like, scientists will tell you that, it's like 1% difference between your DNA and an orangutan's or something, And, well, there's a reason for that.
Some of the human beings, it might be. And a few of them.
Yeah, and the same with the dog, isn't it? We've got the same DNA as cats and dogs and stuff like that. Well, there's a reason for that, because we all need lungs, we all need stomach, eyes, ears. We need all the same equipment. It's just that within the human being, it's configured in a different way, and we have a gift of a brain that has a consciousness, and also a mind, a free thinking mind, an intelligence that can speculate, and we have a spirit within us as well that we know, and we question things. So basically, when a group of, say, primates are in the jungle and a lion comes along and threatens them, they don't. I dispute that they have a complex multi-thousand word language. They don't. To me, they just communicate. They make.
They don't. I think so.
They don't say.
Also, Kevin, you got to think as well that if we're looking at intelligence, and you look at, for example, a beetle or something else, they will pretend that they're dead to avoid getting harmed. And I think that's astonishing when you actually witness that. So they have an intelligence, but of course, the intelligence that animals have, and dogs have a sixth sense, and cats and everything. You can see it. You can clearly see it. So they must have a soul, and. But the interesting thing about that is that human beings, if you're allowed that free thinking, if you're allowed to think if, what, and why, they're the three main things. If you can think that if, what, and why, and you're able to question everything and look at it from a rational viewpoint, like we do on the show, we listen to all our guests, not necessarily believe everything they say and not necessarily agree with everything they say, but we listen, and then they can get their point across to other people, and other people can do their own research. And then if they if they find what our guest is saying is true, then that's great. And if they find that what our guest has said is not true, then that's also great, because if
you were reminding me of the female dragonfly. When she doesn't want to mate with the male, she pretends she's dead. I might try that one.
Well, isn't it wicked, isn't it? Eh?
Well, the thing is, so basically, the primates don't have a meeting afterwards and discuss how they could have handled the situation.
No.
And they don't write songs about it, or
no. It'd be very entertaining if they did, though.
It would, yeah. So basically, there's a limit, you see. But scientists are trying to tell you that there's no difference between you and them. They're trying to destroy the spirit within you. You see.
Which is quite interesting, because it kind of leads me on to something that I was also going to mention, and it might be slightly controversial, this one.
Might be.
And I won't say whether I agree or disagree. I'm just putting it out there for people to think about. Now, there's been a bit of a thing out there on the actual word NASA. And if you actually were to add a T into the word NASA, it's an anagram of Satan. Now, obviously, they sort of make a nod to this by the T minus countdown. Well, the T is supposed to stand for time, which, so we're going back to Kronos again. Well, Kronos is Saturn, isn't it? Which is quite interesting. But, of course, there's a lot of the sort of fact checkers and PolitiFact, etc., that debunk it and say, no, it's just a load of old rubbish. You know, the T stands for time, etc., etc. However, if you go and do a bit of exploring and digging, you'll actually find that there are a few references within NASA to Satan, and a couple of which that I'll just drop in. One is the Solar Axion Telescopic Antenna, which actually had an acronym of Satan. So that's a capital S, capital A, capital T, and a capital AN. And I've actually got, if anybody wants it, a copy of this document, which I can show you. It's in the CERN document server as well. It was published in 1999, and it was basically looking for axions, which they believe are prime candidates for dark matter. So this is connected with the CERN operation.
Don't lose your sandwich in there.
No, on the actual document, if that's not bad enough, having the acronym Satan on there, they've actually got a little drawing of a little devil with horns on and a 3-fork and a forked tail on, which I think is quite... They've changed the name of it now, but I thought that was quite interesting. And if you go also onto NASA's site, history.nasa.gov, you'll actually see NASA's Satellite Automatic Tracking Antennas, another acronym, Satan. It's quite interesting, isn't it?
Well, you know, this is the problem. There's an interesting thing, is that there's a lot of, you know, whether they're Christians or deeply religious people or whatever, and they've got this thing about, there are followers of satanic worship. There is no question about that, and that is not a good thing. People are crossing the wires between them and people who are intuitive, gifted people, and that's a big problem. You know, that's a big problem. You're intuitive, I'm intuitive, Shona is. People all over the world are intuitive. We're not satanic. We are not interested in satanic worship. Nothing like that.
No,
so
I think this is
very important. Yeah,
this is where the sort of difference with the word occult. I mean, it inspires in some people who don't know. They think, oh my goodness, it's something terrible.
Something to do with Satan.
But it isn't. No. Occult simply means hidden. So it's that which is hidden, and that's all it is. But going back onto the NASA thing again, there are some also rather interesting things, because the Earth, apparently, we're told, orbits the sun at 66,600 miles an hour. You had the female American astronaut, Peggy Whitson, who supposedly holds a record among American female astronauts for spending the most time in space, and that was 666 days.
What a coincidence. Well, we've got our lottery numbers for the week then.
Yeah. So again, things that make you go,
Also, you know, you've got the chevron in the NASA logo, which represents like, you know, a serpent's tongue.
The V.
Yeah, it's quite, you know, it's quite disturbing, really, when you think of it, because you know, on TV and everything, they are trying to brainwash people, and they have done for years, trying to brainwash people. And the fact of it is, people do actually believe in a lot of the stuff that they're being told, the propaganda, and that's very, very worrying. And it has to stop, doesn't it? The propaganda's got to stop.
The reason for that is because mainstream media is their only source of information.
Yeah, that's true.
And the problem is platforms like what we're on and that we appear on around the world haven't got the traction or the finance, and the algorithms are against us. You get more and more censorship now than ever. I know there are rat runs and there are ways around it and things. But I think what you call legacy media and the mainstream, people are so fed up with it that, but what they don't know where else to go. You know, they don't. Where else can we go? Is what they. And sometimes there are in between platforms and things that people, maybe, if I dare say, you know, with our types of views or whatever, outside of the box, if you like. Kind of say, oh, you know, well, that's just to corral people into a certain way of thinking, you know, to shut them up. But in a way, also those things, those platforms, the likes of what's that guy's name? The Cockney geezer.
What, Gary?
Russell Brand. Now, Russell Brand.
Russell Brand, okay.
Yeah.
He gives you right. He gives you all the truths and all that. I actually edited one of his shows once, the Trues News. I don't know if anyone remembers that.
Yeah.
It was all very covert. You know, someone turned up at my door in a Mercedes very, very late at night with one of these USB sticks and said, it's on there. I said, what is it? You know, it's from Russell. Okay. And I want you to edit the show, you know, just see what you can do with it. And okay. I digress. But anyway, but people like him also, you see, the thing is that you must also, I would say, see people like him as a mule that can get you to the door. Not necessarily the means by which you enter the house. In other words, you know, you don't take your car into the living room, do you, unless you can't drive. You know, it gets you to, it's a vehicle that gets you to the door. And it's up to you if you want to go through. So I always try and put a positive spin on those things.
Well, yeah, it's like people like Brand and David Icke and all that. They, you know, they bring you some truths, and the problem is that people follow them like sheep, don't they? That's the problem. And you know, if you, it doesn't matter what you do in this life, but I think you must examine, you know, that which is good and that which is bad, and then come to a conclusion yourself.
Yeah, what we do, we inspire people into a deeper thinking about things. And, you know, one of the things about beliefs is I spoke to a guy a friend of mine from Slough originally. He lives out in the Himalayas somewhere now. God knows where he is now. And a big tech guy, you know, I might have mentioned him before. And I said to him, you know, what made you up sticks and end up in the sticks out in the middle of nowhere in some part of the world? He said that I got tired of people trying to get me to believe what they believed. Just that one thing, when he said that, I thought, you know what, he's right. Yeah. You know, but you either know or you don't know. And people have their place, of course. But it's when people are so desperate to get you to believe what they believe, and if you don't, then you're the enemy. And he's right that there is that toxicity, that destructive element of a belief, which is only a belief. Yeah, you know, it's okay to have beliefs, but they shouldn't be the dominant thing. And I think within it all, you either know or you don't know. Like, I don't believe in God. I know in God.
Yeah, for sure.
And you see Orthodox ministers having a crisis of faith. You know, is that God? I don't know. You know, you think, wow, you know, they have these crises of faith, these religious people, and you know,
well, that's the point, Kevin. Like me, I believe in God, but I'm not religious at all. I've got no time for religion, but I do believe in God. So, you know, as being that universal intelligence, that sublime intelligence, that, you know, there has to be a sublime intelligence. It's pointless arguing the point, isn't it? There has to be.
Yeah. If I mean, you know, you look at what we were talking about before, about the insects, you know, about like the way the beetle pretends to be
Pretends to be dead. Yeah.
You know, now if let's imagine, no, people can't see it, but let's just imagine that this I'm holding up as an artificial hand. Yeah. Just imagine like a mechanical hand, right? And it moves and does all the things that the human hand has, an opposable thumb and all that. Now, if I stick up my real hand next to it, say, right, well, this artificial one is creative design, but like the real hand that made that one is a coincidence.
Mm.
You know, it just came out of like some cosmic coincidence, some big explosion.
There are a lot of coincidences, though, aren't there?
Oh, Lord.
It's again calling out, I think it's Sir Frederick Hoyle, the astronomer royal, when he described the Big Bang theory. He said, you know, he said it's ludicrous. He said he was one of the decent astronomer royals that we had. You know, he said it's like a hurricane whirling through a junkyard and assembling a Boeing 747 jumper.
Very good analogy. We just got a quick question as well from Lisa. She said, do any of you watch Daniel List on his YouTube channel called Dark Journalist? I've been following him for quite a few years now. I haven't heard of that, Lisa.
No.
Well, we have now. We'll go have a look.
Check him out.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. Yeah, always looking for different sources, more sources of information we can get, the better, because
exactly, yeah,
and all the time. And you know, we should use the likes of Facebook and YouTube as funnels to our own platforms and things. You know, to circumnavigate their algorithms. This is what's happening. So, like where my dad is from, Valentia Island, which is the southwest coast of Ireland, it's just in the Atlantic, off the coast of Ireland. And they found these tetrapod tracks there many, many years ago. There's lots of things that the island's famous for, but people don't know it's Valentia Island. So it's Valentia with the T, by the way. T-I-N.
It's an island on island, isn't it?
It's, well, as my grandmother would say, she said, "You've heard of Ireland?" We say, "Yes." She says, "Well, Ireland is an island off the coast of Valencia."
Island.
So anyway, so they found these tetrapod tracks there, which were supposed to have come out of the sea, you know. So basically, you've got a fish that comes out of the sea, finds another fish that came out of the sea, mates, has kids, and progenites and develops somehow. Then turns into a monkey, and then that turns into you and I. And, you know, it's just the ludicrousness of it. Now, you can go to where the tetrapod tracks are, and it's just these, like, you know, they were set in some kind of mud or something. And to be honest with you, there's no way that scientists can speculate that they were tetrapod tracks, or that's the story behind.
But it's a lot of story.
It might have been a chicken.
Yeah, and there's also, you know, people, you know, when they try to say that the seat of all, you know, humanity was Africa and everything, I can't accept things like that. You know, honestly.
Well, actually, there's been some proof fairly recently that that's not quite the case.
It's absolute nonsense. You know, this is the problem. It doesn't matter what religion you are, what faith you are, what creed or colour you are. That makes no difference whatsoever. The simple fact of it is it's not your truth or my truth, it's the truth.
Fact.
Fact. You know, fact demonstrated. Let's have facts demonstrated, and then we can move forward.
Because in the beginning, there was nothing, you see, and nothing all of a sudden decided to become everything in the film. And they explained exactly what to do, how to form into protons, electrons, neutrons, atoms, form into gases, liquids, solids, and plasmas, and then form into planets and suns and moons and stars and galaxies, and eventually form organic life and turn into you and I and us talking right now. What a coincidence. But the idea of a creative designer is ludicrous, you know, and they're selling you that fairy story, but you won't get your PhD if you
No, I think the thing is that, you know, what Gary and I have noticed, and I think we've chatted about this before privately, is that they do appear to be trying to take God, the divine intelligence, out of everything.
Yeah. No soul either. You won't have no soul.
They want everything to be material, so they're taking anything spiritual of any kind. They're trying to completely remove it.
And this is part of the simulation, the simulacra that we live in, that you're offered a fake reality. They're offering you devices and things and a way of life and a model for life that you think you need to survive. In fact, this is only a post-industrial revolution idea. If you go back to the end of the last century, the 20th century, and the decades preceding that, we were more happy, we were thinner, we were better fed overall, we had a better quality of life. And if you look back earlier and earlier and earlier, when you look into distant centuries, going all the way back, I've slowly come to the conclusion, as a psychic person going around all these different sites and places, I never, seldom if ever, except where there's war or something, do I ever get a bad feeling and think, God, it must have been terrible living here.
Exactly.
Presented with this savage sort of feudal, everyone's heads getting chopped off all the time, this terrible existence, which, you know, some parts of it were brutal, but we can't define in contemporary terms previous eras. That's the mistake, and that's really woke liberalism and politicization of everything, because people were different back then. People had their own ways and their own cultures and their own sets of values.
We need more good news, don't we? We need more positive news all the time. That's what we need. We need more upliftment and everything. And, you know, as Shona was pointing out, you see this nonsense with this net zero. I've never heard such nonsense in my life. I mean, as Shona explains it, if you've got net zero...
Well, if you, I mean, carbon is fundamental to life. So if we don't have carbon, we'll have no life. So is that what they want?
But you can have an electric car, though.
Yeah.
Oh, Lord.
Brian Gerrish on UK Column said made an interesting point. He said, "We are the carbon
that they want to eliminate." Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Single most fundamental abundant element in the entire universe is carbon. We can't survive without it. Carbon is the gas of life. I was talking to some woman from New York who was one of these kinds of, deep into the matrix, you know. I said, so basically all of us sitting in this room now talking to each other, we're killing each other because we're breathing out carbon dioxide. You know, and so it was just like you could see a medication stop working. You know,
it's incredible.
Well, of course, all the celebrities are trying to promote all this. I mean, I won't mention his name, but I thought he was quite interesting with what he was doing with sort of organic farming and everything else. That's all very nice. And then he started promoting and pushing this, and I thought, no thanks.
Well, they're trying to get rid of all the farmers, ain't they? I mean, you know, if you're getting rid of all the farmers and then you've got to eat worms and cockroaches and all this,
you will eat.
It's madness.
And they won't be eating the bugs. And you
no. They'll have a nice steak, won't they? They're trying to get rid of all the cows because of all the methane. I've never heard such nonsense in my life.
If that on the same then what about vegetarians?
Well, yeah.
They could get a lot of methane.
Wow. I mean, don't be in the same room as a vegetarian. When nature takes its course, because, you know, they really need to eat a burger, some of them, you know. Now,
oh, Lord.
The thing is, now, I mean, years ago, I'll give this to Ike, you know, David Ike. I remember one of his quotes. I might be going to see him soon. He said, what was that? About walking into a supermarket, and he said, "Do you really think that's food in there?" And just that one simple thing, he said, supermarkets are designed to kill you. And in many ways, he's right, because, you know, there's too much fat and sugar and salt.
Well, their prices are.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's what. Yeah.
Have you seen the size of shopping bills these days? Oh my god!
Right, when someone faints at the checkout, it's usually
Lord.
Just to buy 2 sausages is about £5 now, isn't it? Goodness
well,
sake.
I said to the woman in Marks and Spencer today when I got my bill, it was like £46. I laughed. I said, "Do you know what?" I said, "I thought you said £46 then." And I turned to the people in the queue and said, "Does it sound like £46 to you?" And they go, "Yeah," you know, we're all laughing.
And you had 2 items in your basket.
Yeah, but we use comedy, don't we, to get across some important messages.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Do you find, Kevin, that, I mean, I had a woman at a bus stop, and she said to me, we were talking about, we got onto the subject of some very interesting subjects in America and everything. And she said, "Oh, you're one of those conspiracy theorists." And I said, "No, dear." I said, "I'm a seeker of the truth." Now, do you get that aimed at you, that you're a conspiracy theorist?
Yes.
The succinct
yeah. So, yeah, but, you know, if people are of that mindset where they say that that's all they can define you as in those terms, then, you know, maybe you're wasting your time with them, because I think with all the things that have happened, people should have woken up by now. I think those who are awake, like we saw it over the last few years with the mass rollout of everything, and we've got this fake economic crash at the moment, which is another way of stealing everything and dealing with everything. You know, that people still, when faced with the facts, don't want to look at them, but a lot of people have woken up. But you've just got to let people wake up of their own volition, really. It's something that's within you, isn't it? It's like finding a new path within yourself. Sometimes you can inspire them along the way, point things out, but sometimes people, because they've been conned into certain things, they feel ashamed about thinking a certain way and can't face it. So when you face them with an unspeakable truth, or the truth of a lie, they suddenly put their hands over and blah 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 and over their ears, and they don't want to know. They walk away and they never speak to you again. I spoke to a climate scientist a while back. I got into it at a conference with him. I wasn't speaking at the conference. I was just one of the attendees, but he was one of the delegates. And I basically put forward the idea that the the HADCAM computer model from 1987, which is the one that permeated through Al Gore's years, you know. I said, basically an Atari, you know, home computer that modeled weather models for centuries ahead. I said to him, and he's saying, yeah, and he's one of these, he's like, you know, scientific, and he talks outside of his mouth, you know, he's like, yeah. He's saying, he said, well, yeah, you know, so anyway, I said, well, okay, tell me 2 things that can't be factored into the Kyoto climate change agreement. This is going back towards the end of the last century. And he's like, no, you couldn't think, you know. So I said, well, I'll give you one of them. One of them is the sun. The sun cannot be factored into any of the models, whereas you know, as I know, I said to him, that the sun is the driver of weather. I said, what's your area? He said, oceanography, which I knew anyway. I was just, you know, feeding him straight back. I said, the other thing that can't be factored in is the oceans, which is the biggest producer of carbon dioxide.
Exactly.
So anyway, he just didn't know where to look, what to do. He was looking for the exit. He was, and they have this look on them, you know. It's like usually it's again like the medication stopped working, you know.
Yeah.
And you can hear a penny drop or something. You know?
He's probably thinking, "Oh, the funding's going to dry up now."
With all these stats. Yeah, well, that's right. You see, so he hit me with all. Oh, I've read some fantastic papers on. He's going on about all these papers citing and, you know, cited by so peer reviewed and all that. I said, yeah. I said, for weather models, what, you know, 100 into the next century? Yes, precisely. I said, you don't even know what the weather's going to be like on Tuesday.
Exactly.
No.
Yeah.
Well, remember Michael Fish when he
never spoke to me again. I went to the conference.
How to win friends and influence them by Kevin O'Doherty.
Yeah.
He was crossing the road. I was coming out in my car, and he was getting booked or something. Though he's one of those eco types, you know, get the book sort of thing. And he was just staring at me walking out, and I waved to him, saying, "Yeah, goodbye," and that. And he just looked at me like.
But that's the point, Kevin, isn't it? You should never be frightened of discussion and reason and being able to change your view if someone can prove to you that what you're saying is wrong, and that's the simple fact of it.
No, the truth has nothing to hide, does it?
No,
and it should be our friend. That's right, and we should never turn our back on it. And we can fall out with it sometimes because it can really get on our nerves, can't it?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
We've got about 5 minutes left, Kevin, just to let you know.
Is there anything you want to cover before we go?
No, there's quite a bit there. Other than say that, so I was keen to, I think we've covered it really in terms of that they are offering us simulations of things. Like even with the supermarket there, it's simulated food, and it's not real food. A lot, it's mixed in with real food, but a lot of things that we accept as real aren't really real. They're just, they take on a reality, and we think that's the only reality. And so you see it with soap operas and things like that. I've had discussions with people saying, well, if I don't watch soaps, how am I going to learn?
No.
Hardly a yardstick to go by, is it?
Lordy. Well, you know what, Kevin? The interesting thing, I was listening to the BBC. I don't very often listen to the BBC, but you do get some laughs from it. But anyway, I was listening to the BBC, and they were talking about AI, artificial intelligence, and how it was going to change the world and everything. And I thought I'll have a little go on it and asked it a couple of questions, and it got the questions wrong. And then you think to yourself, well, if it can't get a couple of questions right, how is it going to change the world?
Well, exactly. And I actually had a go as well. I posed it the same question, but in slightly different ways, and it completely contradicted itself. And
it's man-made, isn't it? It's not some one of it's man-made. The computers are man-made, aren't they?
It takes grammar, and if there's a question or in there, then it'll offer an answer, and it just generates it essentially from language or any language really.
It's clever. Let's say it's clever, but not that clever.
Yes, I mean it's all technology, because you used to have a doctor, I've forgotten his name, on Windows 3.11. There was a doctor who talked to an artificial doctor. I used to have conversations with him, and it's built into 3.11, and it was meant to be for office workers or people like myself chained to a desk where you were supposed to chat to someone informally. Now that there's many people listening in on that, but check it out, that was on Windows 3.11 back in the day.
Interesting.
Question, you'd have quite a good conversation, and it was quite intelligent, so it's old technology.
Well, you that's the thing with you, Kevin. You're a wonderful guest, and a very, very intelligent man, and a great conversationalist, and we love having you on our show. And if anybody else would like to join our show, then please feel free to get in touch with us. We'd love to have you as a guest, wouldn't we?
Yeah, definitely. But it's all fascinating stuff, and one of the things that I missed out, and we haven't sort of really got that much time to touch on, I was going to say about the Mars rover as well, because that's quite interesting, because in relation to Devon Island in Greenland, because actually, as our daughter pointed out, it's actually on Google Earth. They've got a picture when you get up Devon Island. On Google Earth, it shows the NASA Mars rovers on there, which is quite interesting.
Yeah.
Again, more simulated reality.
Anyway, so I think we better leave it there because we'll have to have another show. I think there's so much to talk about. But thank you so much, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kevin,
for joining. And it's nice to see you as well, because normally we're on the telephone, aren't we? So for about 3 hours.
I see you all the time, so
Anyway, so thank you to the audience as well. Thanks for joining us on the Allens Investigate, and you can check us out at www.theallensinvestigate.com and on Facebook and Instagram. We're broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network 105.3 and 107.7 FM from the beautiful city of New Orleans, and also on Roku, both live streamed and also archived, I believe, as well. So it's been really, really fascinating, Kevin.
Fascinating.
Thank you so much. And I'm sure we'll be talking very soon as well.
Yes. Thank you for having me on.
All the best.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.